Senator J.D. Vance from Ohio forcefully defended Donald Trump's vow to use the U.S. military against certain Americans, a group Trump has repeatedly labeled the enemy from within. Across several television interviews that aired Sunday, Vance also dismissed former Trump White House Chief of Staff John Francis Kelly's warnings that the former president meets the definition of a fascist.
Trump campaign is pushing back against a New York Times interview with the former president's chief of staff, John Kelly.
He's certainly an authoritarian, admires people who are dictators. He has said that. So he certainly falls into the general definition of fascist, for sure.
The retired general also said Trump demands loyalty to himself over the Constitution, and in response to Trump's recent comments about using the military against domestic opponents, Kelly said advisors repeatedly told Trump not to do that.
Originally, the conversation would be, Mr. President, that's outside your authority, or, that's a routine use. You really don't want to do that inside the United States. But now that he's talking about it as I'm going to do it, it's disturbing.
He also disputed former Vice President Mike Pence's contention that Trump forced him to choose between loyalty to the Constitution and loyalty to Trump himself. With 9 days to go before the election, Vance appears to be stepping up his defense of Trump against warnings from Democrats and Republicans alike that Trump would be an authoritarian figure. In recent weeks, numerous former Trump officials have raised alarms that the Republican presidential nominee is unfit to lead the nation. The vice presidential candidate was prepared to defend and often reframe some of Trump's most divisive remarks in interviews with CNN, NBC News, and CBS News. Additionally, Vance stated on Sunday that he views Russian President Vladimir Putin as a competitor and an adversary, constantly refusing to refer to Putin as the enemy.
Do you see Russian President Vladimir Putin as an ally or an enemy?
Well, I think that he's clearly an adversary. He is a competitor, but I think that we also have to be smart about diplomacy too. Just because we don't like somebody doesn't mean that we can't occasionally engage in conversations with them. And I think it's important, if we're ever going to end the war in Ukraine, fundamentally at some level, we're going to have to engage in some sort of negotiation between Ukraine, between Russia, between our NATO allies in Europe. And that's just a necessary part. Doesn't mean we have to like it, by the way. Doesn't mean we condone the Russian invasion of Ukraine. But I think that sometimes you do have to engage in diplomacy, even with and maybe especially with your adversaries. I think the bigger problem, Kristen, if we step back for a little bit, of course, we're on the cusp, obviously, of a presidential election where I want the American people to select my running mate as the next president. Whether it's the cost of groceries, whether it's the southern border, and importantly, whether it's the chaos all over the world, I think really the theme of this election is that Kamala Harris broke things in the world, in the country, and Donald Trump will fix it. And if we get back to his steady leadership, it's not just going to mean lower grocery prices at home, it's also going to mean a much more stable and peaceful world.
When you say that he's an adversary, just to get back to the question, you're not willing to go so far as to call him an enemy.
Well, we're not in a war with him, and I don't want to be in a war with Vladimir Putin's Russia. I think that we should try to pursue avenues of peace. I'd also call China certainly a competitor, but we're not in a war with China either. I do think, though, that China constitutes the biggest threat that we have for the United States of America, and I think that we have to be serious about it. But I think we have to be careful about the language that we use in international diplomacy. We can recognize, obviously, that we have adversarial interests with Russia. We can condemn Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and I have, and of course the president has, but we also need to engage in some smart diplomacy if we're ever going to get out of the mess that Kamala Harris has left us in and get back to a posture of peace.
Vance claimed that Trump meant the enemy from within when he indicated he would back the use of troops against what he and Trump have referred to as left-wing lunatics in a heated interview with CNN's Jake Tapper, although the former president has frequently used the term to refer to both California representatives Nancy Pelosi and Adam Schiff. He argued that Trump did not intend to include them in the group of Americans against whom he would use military force. Kelly and the other prominent former Trump administration officials who have come forward have been accused by Vance of being belligerent. Vance also claimed in his Meet the Press interview that the Republicans who are now opposing Trump wish to provoke conflicts. I promise you that John Kelly and former Congresswoman Liz Cheney would be at the front of the line supporting Donald Trump if he wanted to start a nuclear war with Russia, Vance stated.